Hello everyone, so we are going to tackle a new topic again for the day. But before that, let's have a recap first. What was our topic last meeting? Reading, right? Exactly. So what is reading again? Reading is an act of interpreting written text to get or to understand and obtain information from it, right? And there are 5 strategies in reading. Number 1 is previewing, right? So what is previewing? Previewing involves quickly looking over a text to get a sense of its main idea, content, and structure. The second one is skimming. Skimming involves reading quickly over a text to get the general idea without focusing on every detail. The third one, or the third strategy, is scanning. So what is scanning? Scanning means, or it involves searching for specific details, informations, and idea. The fourth one is what? Intensive reading. So what is intensive reading? It involves reading carefully, slowly, and in detail to get or to fully understand the content of a particular text. And lastly, which is critical reading, this involves reading critically and analytically to form your own opinion and interpretation. Okay, so I think you are ready to our new topic, or for our new topic, which is sentence structure. So what do you think is a sentence structure? Well, sentence structure refers to the arrangement of words, phrases, and clauses in a sentence to convey a complete thought. Okay, so there are actually four kinds of sentence according to structure, which are simple sentence, compound sentence, complex sentence, and lastly, compound complex. Let's proceed to the first structure, which is simple sentence. So, what is a simple sentence to you? Do you have any idea? Well, simple sentence contains a subject and verb and expresses a complete thought. So I repeat, it contains a subject and a verb which expresses a complete thought. Like for example, the dog barked loudly. As you can see in this sentence, the dog is the subject, right? And bark is the verb. Another example, Sarah loves to read novels and it is snowing outside. But what if we say John and Jamie slept? Is it still considered as a simple sentence even if there are 2 subjects? What do you think? Well, probably yes, because the sentence contains only one independent clause, and an independent clause is a group of words that has a subject and a verb and expresses a complete thought. So in this case, John and Jamie is the compound subject joined by the word and as a conjunction, and the word is left here is the verb. To clarify it for you, a simple sentence doesn't have to be short. It simply needs to have one independent clause and no dependent clauses, even if with a compound subject, as long as there is a single verb without any additional clauses, the sentence remains simple. And what if we say Samantha? Samantha stands and resides. As you can see in the sentence, there are 2 verbs, right? So what do you think? Is it still considered as a simple sentence? Well, of course, still considered because it contains one independent clause only with a compound verb. So in this case, Samantha is the subject, stands and resides is the compound verb, which are joined by the conjunction and. So another confusing example, what if we say Jeremy and Sonny sing and dance? What do you think? Is it still a simple sentence? Yes, of course, because it consists of one independent clause only, like what I have said earlier, and a compound subject, which are Salem and Sally, and the compound verbs, which are sing and dance. So, why are these sentences still considered as simple? Because a simple sentence can have a compound subject, a compound verb, or both, but it remains simple as long as there is only one independent clause without any dependent clauses. So clear? Okay, so let's proceed now to the next structure of sentences, and we call it, what do you think? Compound sentence. Okay, so what is a compound sentence? A compound sentence consists of two independent clauses joined by a conjunction or a semicolon. If you are familiar with the acronym FANBOYS, which are for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so, these are examples of coordinating conjunctions. So here are examples of compound sentences. I enjoy reading, but I also love watching movies. Why do you think it is a compound? Because, well, it has two independent clauses, which are I enjoy reading and I also love watching movies. This means that they could probably stand alone as a sentence. Clear? And they are joined by the coordinating conjunction but, which shows a contrast between these two activities. So let's have another example. We can go to the beach or we can go to the amusement park. Still, it is a compound sentence because it contains two independent clauses, right? One is we can go to the beach, and the other one is we can go to the amusement park, joined by the coordinating conjunction again, or, which this sentence presents as an alternative between two choices. So let's have another example of a compound sentence which or where semicolon is being used, like she is not sure if she will succeed. She has no experience. Here, the semicolon joins two related independent clauses. The first clause is she is not sure if she will succeed, which is already a complete thought, right? And so is the second clause, which is she has no experience. The semicolon here indicates a close relationship between these two ideas. Another example of a semicolon being used. They didn't like the food, they left the restaurant. This sentence uses a semicolon to connect two independent clauses that are closely related to each other. So both clauses, they didn't like the food and they left the restaurant, could function as separate sentences. Let's have another or last example of a compound sentence. He was taking pictures of the game. He had a good camera. As I repeat, the semicolon connects two independent clauses that are thematically related. In each clause, he was taking pictures of the game and he had a good camera could be a sentence on its own. So each of my examples contains clauses that could stand alone as sentences. So the use of coordinating conjunctions and semicolons is key in forming and or to form a compound sentence. Understand? So the third structure of sentences is complex sentence. Again, what is a complex sentence? Well, a complex sentence contains one independent clause and at least one dependent clause. In compound sentences, it consists of two independent clauses joined by a conjunction or a semicolon, right? So in a complex sentence, the dependent clause is connected to the independent clause using a subordinating conjunction or a relative pronoun like after, although, as, because, before, how, if, once, since, than, that, though, until, where, whether, while, and more. So let's have an example. Although she was tired, she finished her homework. So in this sentence, the dependent clause comes first. That's why a comma is placed before the independent clause. However, if the independent clause comes first, no comma is needed. So in the sentence, it is complex because although she was tired is a dependent clause that cannot stand alone as a sentence, and it is connected to the independent clause she finished her homework by the subordinating conjunction although. Another example is that if you save your money, you can buy a new game. If you save your money here is the dependent clause introduced by the subordinating conjunction if. So the independent clause here is you can buy a new game, which can stand alone as a sentence. In this next example, the independent clause comes first, so putting a comma is no longer needed. Like the dog barked loudly whenever the mailman passed by. The dependent clause here is whenever the mailman passed by, which provides additional information only about when the dog bark is connected to the independent clause, which is the dog barked loudly by the subordinating conjunction whenever. Clear? So another example, we decided to stay indoors because the weather was cold. So in the sentence, because the weather was cold is a dependent clause here, right? So that gives a reason for the action in the independent clause. We decided to stay indoors. The two clauses are joined by the subordinating conjunction because. Another example, she won the award, which was unexpected. In this sentence, which was unexpected is a dependent clause providing additional information again about the independent clause she won the award. It is connected by the relative pronoun which. Okay, so each of my examples contain an independent clause that could be a sentence or can stand alone by itself, and a dependent clause that cannot. The dependent clauses here add meaning to the independent clauses, creating a complex sentence structure. And subordinating conjunctions here are words that connect a dependent clause to an independent clause in a sentence. So they introduced the dependent clauses and indicate the relationship between these two clauses. Understand? Okay, so let's proceed now to the last part of sentence structure, which is compound complex or compound complex sentence. Complex sentence has two or more independent clauses and at least one dependent clause. Like for example, although I was scared, I went to the haunted house and I ended up having a great time. This sentence is an example of a compound complex because it has one dependent clause, which is the although I was scared, and two independent clauses, which are I went to the haunted house and I ended up having a great time. The dependent clause here introduces a condition, while the independent clauses could each stand alone as a sentence. Let's have another example. She completed her essay, but she wasn't happy with it because it seemed rushed. In this sentence, the dependent clauses are she completed her essay and she wasn't happy with it, which are joined. They are joined by the coordinating conjunction but and because. It seemed rushed here is a dependent clause that explains why she wasn't happy. So another example again. If you save enough money, you can buy a new car or you could go on a luxury vacation. The dependent clause here is if you save money, which sets a condition for the two independent clauses, which are you can buy a new car and you could go on a luxury vacation, joined by the coordinating conjunction or. Now let's have last example. So I want to buy a new book but I cannot decide whether should I get a novel or a biography. So this sentence has two independent clauses, which are I want to buy a new book and I can't decide whether I should get a novel or a biography. The conjunction but here connects these clauses and the dependent clause whether I should get a novel or a biography gives additional information about the second independent clause. Clear? So each of my examples contain again at least two independent clauses that could stand alone as a sentence and at least one dependent clause that cannot stand alone, making them compound complex sentences. So understood? So that is our topic for today. Thank you everyone for listening and watching in this report. Bye-bye. Hello again everyone. So here's how I started and planned making my video lesson. So since my topic is sentence structure, then of course I had to teach about sentences, and I wanted to make it for you to understand it better. So I started by thinking about what a sentence needs. Like every sentence has a subject and a verb. The subject is who or what the lesson is about, and the verb tells what the subject does, right? So I wrote down my ideas on a paper first, and after that I encoded it. With that idea, I used examples like the dog is barking loudly to show a simple sentence, and I made sure to use words that are easy to know and understand to make sure that you're able to follow my discussion. Making it clear, it was all about the different ways we can put our words together to make sentence. You know, like the simple sentence or simple ones that just having one thing happening, and then the fancier ones were a couple of ideas together. So I started doing my lesson before the exam week, and I'm thinking of how I can make it interesting. So I started by thinking about how I talk every day and how I could show that in my video. I wanted you to see how these sentence types are not just for writing fancy stuff, but for everyday use too. When I'm done writing my explanations, I practice saying these words out loud a bunch of times, but I wasn't going for perfection, just a natural, like I was talking to a friend. And I also, for formal outfit, I pick out a nice long sleeve, nothing too flashy, but just something that made me feel good and wouldn't distract from my lesson. When it was time to hit record, of course, I just went for it. I talk about the sentences, gave my examples, and asked some questions from you, even though I know that you wouldn't get answers from me. From you, because I'm also the one that will answer my questions. And that's pretty much it. I kept it chill, like we're just hanging out together and talking about sentences. Like it's like we're having a video call, watching me explaining, and feel like you can use these structures when you're writing or even just chatting with someone. Actually, during the process, I set up my camera and lights in in this room. I practice speaking clearly and slowly. I wanted to make it sure that you could follow along. Even when everything was ready, I started recording. I talk about subjects, verbs, and objects. I used my hands, gestures to show how they come together to make a sentence. And I made it sure reminding myself that I had to smile while reporting just to make a good vibe and make it fun. The preparation for filming is actually hard because I need to make sure that the angle of the camera is centered, also the lighting, my look, and of course my look. So I hope you got the interested in watching my video lesson. And in fact, after filming, I watched the video to make sure that it is clear, good, and simple. So that's all. Thank you.